Hello, this is Brian Foster on Kardec Radio, presenting the program Spiritism and the Spirit World Around Us.
Hello, this is Sunday, May 6, 2018, and we are now on episode 3, The Power of Spirits. This has all come from my book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, talking about 5 different aspects of what I was able to derive from all the writings and messages of various spirits to the Reverend Vale Owen. This book covers the spirit education on the lower levels of heaven and the higher levels of heaven, the spirit attributes, and now we're in the power of spirits. And then after this, in this book, is still the knowledge of the universes. In all of these live streaming that we do on Kardec Radio, is I post these on YouTube. I have a channel on YouTube. Go to my blog site, nwspiritism.com, and you can click on the YouTube, join my YouTube channel, please there, and subscribe if you want to hear any of my past video streaming that we have on Kardec Radio. We have this program every Sunday night at 4 p.m. Pacific, 5 Mountain, 6 Central, 7 Eastern, and all the other time zones in between, all on Kardec Radio Facebook page. There's live streaming. It's also live on Kardec Radio, which is an app. Please put that app on your iPhone or Android device. Just type in Kardec Radio, and you will be able to listen to Spiritist literature. Spiritist programs 24 hours a day. And of course, Spiritism all starts with what? The Spirits book. This is the Headwaters. This is one of the 5 main books that Allan Kardec did, and this is really the first. This has answers to 1,019 questions that he posed to spirits, not just to one spirit, not just with one medium. He was not a medium in the sense we know it. He used mediums throughout Europe to get answers. Oh, from Guatemala City, Edwin. Hello to you. He used mediums in different cities, and he asked them the same question, and he did not collate the answers unless he had the similar answers from different mediums to his questions. So this book is the third revelation. This is should be very interesting to you. So I recommend everybody to get this book, the Spirits book. And also you can just type in Allan Kardec PDF and you can find it in PDF. That's how I found it. It's free. Otherwise, you can buy it on Amazon or the EDICI bookstore. You can go to my blog site, nwspiritism.com. You click on his picture up in the top right, and it'll take you right to that bookstore. Okay, let's get to it. The power of spirits. Now, what are we on now? Oh, there's Vanessa. How spirits communicate with us. So on Monday, December 3rd, and this is really interesting, December 3rd, 1917, at 5:25 p.m. in England, the spirit Kathleen, she was kind of the spokesperson for a group of spirits, right? There's usually a group of spirits that talking directly to the mind of a medium that's very important. And this is what she said to the Reverend Vale Owen. When we come to Earth, friend, we say to one another, by the way, that we are going into the land of the mist and twilight, that we may in the interior world which we find there shed abroad somewhat of our light and warmth. For indeed that these be much needed, and we are able to sense, even in those far spheres from which we come. You may wonder by what process of chemistry or dynamics this is made possible to us, and in detail, but we are able to give you a somewhat epitomized account of this affair, and so we will, if it would be of interest to you and those who shall come to read what we give you. This is what the Spirit Kathleen told the Reverend Vale Owen in the book Life Beyond the Veil, in the Ministry of Heaven section. This is the great thing about Spiritism. So Spiritism just didn't start with Allan Kardec. Spiritism is dynamic, right? So you saw, if you read about, any of the books by Allan Kardec, it's all interesting. But then there's books by Leon Denis, there's Reverend Vale Owen. There's just almost 500 books now by the great Brazilian medium Chico Xavier. So it's what the Spiritism brings us is more knowledge all the time, and they give us this knowledge when we are ready for it. So let's get back into. So Kathleen stated that the background to make communication possible is that we all live in the spirit universe. Our physical universe is a subset of the overall spirit domain. She tells us that we live in one ocean of spirit energy, and there are no sharp boundaries, only graduations of ratios of energy versus matter, light and darkness, and so on. It is as if we all lived in the ocean, with certain species existing at great depths and with the entire weight of miles of water above them and little or no light bleeding down, while others living further up with less weight upon them and more light. Communication between disparate species would be difficult, but it would be possible. This is just one of the great revelations brought to us by Spiritism, that we don't live in an encapsulated bubble walled off from the afterlife. We live in the midst of spirit life. Hence, our transformation from physical to spirit life is not as traumatic as it would appear to us. It is the inadequacy of our senses which makes the transition seem so huge, so formidable. We are merely changing state, not being dissolved atom by atom. Our personality remains intact. And I talk a lot about this in what the articles I write and in the YouTube videos and the Kardec radio about we are who we are when we pass away. So if you're ever worried that, what happens when I die? Am I going to be completely different? No. There's good and bad about that. The good is you still who you are. The bad is if you were a criminal or a pickpocket, you still have those tendencies. But our personality remains intact. Kathleen then goes on to detail 3 methods which are employed to handle communications between spirits and incarnates. So the first method is what she called continuous posting. And this is really interesting because this is like in 1950, right? And yet when I read these things, automatically I think of this in context of software, right? Continuous posting is, continuous data, right, being flowed. So this is what she talks about continuous posting. There is a method of continuous posting wherein those workers nearest you hand on messages and report to those in the sphere above. And they continue the operation until the message comes to its destination, where it is to be appropriately dealt with. So think of this in software terms. It's a message, right, being sent all the way through whatever channel it gets to the intended recipient. I'll go on. This is done swiftly, and yet in the flight of any message through the spheres, it is sifted in each and that extracted which is proper to the workers of that particular sphere to undertake its answer. Stop there for a second again. So as the message flows through the spirit realm, it becomes modified so the people that are receiving it will understand it. So it shows you that there's a higher and higher level of spirits who maybe speak and give broad commands, but then those things are narrowed down into something more digestible on who it should be given to. I'll carry on. Also, messages from workers and prayers from the earth are filtered and made suitable for transmission into the higher realms. Were this not done, their earth grossness would weigh them down so heavily that what was in them of sublimity would not be competent to rise and come to the sphere where it is appropriate. It should find destination. So what's she saying? Hence, prayers, pleas, overtly spoken requests for divine intervention are indeed noticed, taken and sent upwards to be analyzed and answered. Like the Wells Fargo teams of horses that delivered mail from one outpost to another to eventually reach its destination, our appeals are loaded upon swift carriers to their journey's end. And the New Testament tells us of the power of prayer. In Mark, it says, whatever you may ask for in prayer, believe you will receive it and it will be granted to it. Now, there's an explanation of this verse in Allan Kardec's The Gospel According to Spiritism. It's very interesting. This is what he says. There are persons who contest the effectiveness of prayer, and they base this argument on the principle that if God knows our needs, it is not needed for them to share them. They add further that since everything in the universe is linked together by external laws, our desires cannot change God's decrees. Without any doubt, there are natural and immutable laws which God cannot derogate according to one's caprice. There is a great distance, however, from believing this and believing that all life circumstances are subject to fatalism. If such were the case, humans would only be a passive instrument with no free will or initiative. Under such a hypothesis, there would be no other recourse than to bend one's head under the blow of every event, without seeking to avoid it. No effort would be made to try to avert danger. So, what is he saying? We must use our free will to shape events. Oh, there's a little Rosalind. To shape events in our favor while keeping in mind the divine laws, such as the golden rule. Staying within a harmony of love for all, we are free to fervently pray for assistance and a correct and good outcome to any situation. Now, the interesting part is that anything we ask for, we will receive it. Think about that for a second. It's now you have to look at this over an arc of an immortal life, right? Which means that could be millions or billions of physical lives. One would not grant a 14-year-old boy his own car to drive. He may pray, no, that would never happen. But because he would have to take classes and pass tests, his prayer would be granted, but not for years, which would seem to be an eternity for him. The same section also tells us what God will grant them if asked with trust is courage, patience, and resignation. What God will also grant them are the means to extricate themselves from their difficulties with the aid of ideas suggested by good spirits at God's urging, thus leaving them the merit. God helps those who help themselves. So these are the kind of prayers that we should ask for, right? This helping others, help ourselves with courage, help ourselves with a way to find the right path. So the more we contribute to what we desire, if the goal is worthy, the more help that will be forthcoming. All of this is in harmony with God's law, since using our free will to successfully complete a trial given to us, where we will provide our sweat, our hard work, our dedication, our activity, intelligence, and prayer, all contributes to where the spirit team will encourage our success to speed us on our way to ascend spiritually. After all, the goal of every soul is to one day become a pure spirit and to assist others along the way. Now, let's examine those prayers and pleas which are not aimed at growth or goodness. In the book Between Heaven and Earth by the Spirit Henri Louis, psychographed by Chico Xavier, there is a question about prayer. A spirit student asked the spirit Clarencio an interesting question. Could a person bent on committing a crime also be using a type of prayer? So this is what he is told. Let's refrain from using the word prayer when dealing with imbalance. Let's use the word invocation. Whenever anyone nurses the desire to commit a wrong, he or she is invoking powers of a low order and is mobilizing resources for which he or she will be held accountable by means of the unfortunate impulses of our soul. We often lower ourselves to the frantic vibrations of anger or immorality, and in such a state it is easy to fall into the foul well of a crime, in whose den we are instantly connected to certain minds stagnated in ignorance, which become instruments for our low idealizations, or for which we become deplorable playthings in the darkness. So again, this is part and parcel of our where we are on this planet of atonement. We walk and we live, we think, we breathe in a sea of spirits. Good spirits, not so good spirits, ignorant spirits, playful spirits, spirits that mean us harm. It's all part of our learning here. It's all part of our life on the campus of Earth, so we can start learning to filter out bad ideas and bad direction. So a theme we always return to that is taken over and over again, not only in the books by Vale Owen, but Chico Xavier, is we must learn to control our thoughts, not just our speak, like our mothers told us to, but even our thoughts. Even trivial occurrences, such as when a person becomes an obstacle in their way. Don't most of us immediately send out bad vibrations toward that person? I know I'm guilty of that. There is little difference between that and actively wishing for a wrong to be committed. So Clarencio warns us to be careful what we want, because we may get it. He goes on to be more specific about the consequences of thinking, of a bad invocation, as he said. So what he says, we can be certain, however, that evil is always a circle closed in on itself, temporarily holding those who have created it. It's like a cyst of short or long duration. which finally dissolves into the infinite good as minds in tune with it start reforming themselves. The Lord puts up with disharmony so that though in the moral readjustments of the spirits who sustain it may take place, since evil reacts on those who practice it, helping them to grasp the excellent in the immortality of the good, which is the unmistakable foundation of the law. We are all masters of our own creation, but at the same time, their unfortunate slaves are happy wards. Let us ask and receive, but let us bear in mind that we must pay for everything we get. Responsibility is the divine principle that no one can escape. Think about what he just said. Evil reacts on those who practice it. How true. We have seen that time and time again in the plight of various acquaintances who attempt to get away with some deed only to end up once more on the short side of life. The rewards of wrongdoing are transitory. The rewards of goodness build upon the path to immortal contentment. Now, that was the posting method. Now, let's talk about the second method that Kathleen talks about. And of course, as I talk about this, and I do in my book, is I take what was given to us by the Reverend Vale Owen and I juxtapose it against what is told to us by the other Spiritist literature. Allan Kardec, Chico Xavier, the Spirit Joanna de Angelis, all these, Emmanuel, Andre Luis, all wonderful. I can't tell you enough. Find the Spiritist literature and read them. It's just fascinating. Now, let's talk about direct method of communication. This method entails a high spirit talking directly to us. Now, the posting method, messages went up and down, and they would tell other spirits, right, to help guide someone, right, through either intuition or something. Now, this is the direct method of communication. As an ambassador would speak for his country, a high spirit would be given the authority to perform whatever tasks are required to assist or hinder from a foolish act us in our physical life. Kathleen explains, this is what she says. There are those of you who have guides in the spheres for special work and guidance. Some of these guides are very high and bright angels, and their proper home is far above those spheres bordering the earth. They may not ever be coming down to those charges, for as high as they be, they are not all powerful, and to descend to earth is expensive of energy, by reason of the necessity of conditioning themselves to the spheres through which they pass. And in each sphere, there is a new condition for them to achieve until they come to earth. Now, this is done from time to time, and indeed not seldom, but when such work is afoot to warrant such an undertaking. But we are ever careful of waste. We have so much to do for others' help, and do not spend lavishly, even of that which is infinite in its supply. We can do our work better, as a rule, by the method of direct communication. Now, what is she telling us? One is never sure the number of humans on Earth who are on vital missions. These could range from helping a small town grow through new businesses, or finally obtaining a clean government, building a religious or healing center to lead a country. While all of us have a mission, which is to improve, some are called for an elevated purpose. And one example of a person where I'm certain that a high spirit was assigned, and which we've been told, is Francisco Chico Xavier. In this case, we even know the name of the spirit mentor, Emmanuel. In fact, it is widely known in Brazil that when Chico died in 2002, Emmanuel, who had previously left Chico's side for a few years earlier, was in the process of incarnating in Brazil, and Chico would be his spirit guide in the 21st century. Hence, rotating responsibilities where one friend is on earth and the other in the spirit realm fully documents the closeness of how we are watched and guided by superior angels in heaven. Kathleen expounds upon this method. She tells us how such a direct link is created and maintained. This is giving us so much information. So when you see people channeling spirits, this is telling you how this is done. This is what she says. In order to establish this, we devise a kind of telephone or telegraph, to use your own speech. A cord of vibrations and pulsations between us and you, and it is constructed of the blended vitality of the guide and the guided. I use here words I like not much over much, but I cannot find other in your brain to use, so they must stand. I refer to such words as construct, vitality, and such of these. Sympathetic intercourse is by this means rendered continuous and sustained. It is like the system of nerves between the body and the brain. It is always potentially operative, whenever need arises of help to be given. Whenever the charge turns to his faraway guide in thought or longing, the guide himself is at once aware and gives answers in the way he judges best. Now, let's look at what she said. Kathleen uses the best word she could find in the mind of a non-scientific person in the 1910s. Imagine the spirit world trying to deliver these advanced concepts to the tribes of Israel thousands of years before Christ. This is why we are told by Spiritism that the book, such as the Old and New Testaments and other ancient religious writings, were fashioned for the culture and technical level of the humans receiving it. If Kathleen were attempting to convey this notion today, she would speak plainer in concept a normal person could comprehend. She could tell us that the link between the spirit and the person is like having a cell phone that is always on and dialed at each other. Their respective geographical locations would never be an impediment to communication. One merely needs to touch to activate and speak either or text a query. So here's the channel. Now, I've also talked about this when I talked about in this book about the importance of the name, right, of a spirit. And also the fact is that each one of us has a unique ID. So if you're connected, somehow the spirit sets up a connection between that spirit and the unique identification of a human, a person in physical body on earth. And when that person thinks of something that is either identifies a query or a request for the high spirit, the person is immediately notified. Now, here is the third method. And she really had a hard time describing this to Vale Owen. I call it the cloud. This is what she says, and this is extremely interesting. There's a third method, but more complicated than either of these I have summarized. It may perhaps be given such a name as universal, which is bad enough, but must serve. In the first process, the stream of thought passing from Earth to spheres more or less remote is handled and modified in each sphere as it travels on its way, like a continuous post across continents. Only there's no change of horses nor pause on the way. In the next, the line is ever open and ever charged, like a telephone with electricity, and is direct in a line from the man on Earth to the guide in his own proper sphere. Now, this is what she's saying. In the third, the process is distinct from either of these. It is that by which every thought and action of man is reported in the heavens, and may, by those competent to do so, be read from time to time. These records are real and permanent, but the aspect of them and their method of construction, it is not possible for us to explain. Words have been very strained to serve in the first two descriptions. Here they fail in total. I will say but this, that every thought of every man has a universal application and effect. Call it ether or what you will. The fluid which fills the spheres is of so sensitive and so compact and continuous of a substance that if you touch it with a sigh at one end of the universe, the effect is registered at the end. Here again, end is not a proper word to use. For in the sense you use it, there is no significance here, but that of which I now try so lamely to come at, so that I may show somewhat of its wonder to you, in which the Savior Christ had in mind, when wiser than I, he did not name it with any name, but spoke of it only as it is found to be in operation thus. Not a hair of your head is hurt, not a fledgling falls from its nest, but the Father of all is notified. So, every thought and action is reported. Now, this was written in 1917. The Spirit Kathleen could not begin to describe how this process could work, but in 1955, 38 years later, more was revealed. In the Realms of Mediumship, again, psychographed by Chico Xavier, published in 1955, I noticed an unusual introduction by the Spirit Emmanuel, who usually writes moral exhortations. But he began the introduction title of this book, In the Realms of Mediumship. And you can buy this on the EDICI bookstore or on Amazon. He titled it Rays, Waves, Mediums, and Minds, by surveying the history of science in what makes up our universe. He started with Leucippus about 500 years before Christ, who theorized that everything was composed of atoms, surveying others, including the Curies who discovered radium, finally mentioned Bohr's, Planck, and Einstein, whereupon he writes this. This vehicle of flesh, the human body, is now nothing more than an electric vortex governed by consciousness. Each tangible body is a bundle of concentrated energy. Matter is transformed into energy, and energy disappears to give way to matter. Raised to the status of investigators of the truth, chemists and physicists, geometricians and mathematicians have become today's priests of the spirit without desiring it. Due to their ongoing studies, materialism and atheism will be compelled to vanish for lack of matter, the base that had ensured their negativistic speculations. So he's telling us the scientists are going to eventually, this is what's been said in Spiritism for many years of philosophy, religion, and science will all come together. That these scientists will find out really how what the spirit world is real. Okay, I go on with the manual. Laboratories are temples in which intelligence is driven to serve God. And even when intellectual activity is misguided, temporarily subordinated to the political hegemony that generates wars, the progress of science is divine conquest. Conquest continues to exalt the good and is bound for a glorious future. The future belongs to the spirit. So he's telling us that no matter what a scientist believes as regard to a higher power, he or she is working toward the day when the existence of the spirit world can't be doubted, which even the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec tells us will occur one day. Now, for the new information which supplies the missing link to the Spirit, Kathleen's description, which he calls universal. This is what Emmanuel said in this introduction. Through the sentiments that characterize their inner life, all individuals emit specific rays and live within the spiritual wave with which they identify themselves. Such truth cannot remain semi-hidden in our sanctuaries of faith. They will radiate from the temples of science like mathematical equations. So, as I was saying before, we all have a unique ID. It's the same as like a RFID, which is a radio frequency identification chip, which is used to track packages and help you check out goods from a store, right? It is a chip with a low-level energy transmitter that's attached to each individual good. So computer systems will instantly know the location, price, and description of the object. Another example is the flow of information from our cell phones or laptops on the internet. Each packet of data, when it goes out on the internet, has a unique identification in the header. So that nugget of data is tagged with who sent it, where it was sent from, the time it was sent, and the information contained in the message. Think of each and every one of us as like a cell phone, which is always on, always broadcasting our vital signs and thoughts. Our signals don't have a limit measured in feet as our cell phones do, but are unlimited as they fly all around us in all directions to be picked up and stored by the Supreme Library. Now, think of us all as radio towers, right? Putting information out everywhere. Now think of the trillions, up to the power of infinity, packets of data that must emanate from every human or other creature from every planet in the universes, all captured and stored, all retrievable upon command, never wiped clean or forgotten, everything. Let's take it down to our level. Let's think about this for a second. When the NSA, the National Security Administration, was first presented with a mandate to pick out possible terrorist activity, they realized they required data from a myriad amount of sources: cell phones, social networks, internet message boards, electronic invoices, ATM transactions, and other avenues. They knew they were trying to find a needle in a haystack. But their brilliant first step was to realize that to find a needle in a haystack, one first must create a haystack. Hence, they built immense server farms with huge storage capability. They routed data from every application that we use in our daily life into one of the largest databases in the world, I surmise. I don't have any direct knowledge of this. From this amount of data, they could query and search the world for what they were tracking. Think of this. The Supreme Intelligence. It's the same. They track, but it's not just what we do, where we are. Where was I at 4:00 on May 6th? No, it's also what am I saying? What am I feeling? What am I thinking in my subconscious? Everything. Therefore, for the Supreme Intelligence, for God, our life is an open book. Nothing is missing. Every thought and deed is recorded. One only needs to know our unique identifier, and all is revealed. All of it in the universal cloud, the database of all databases. From Jesus 2,000 years ago to 1917 during World War I to 1955 during the Cold War, we are being updated on what is actually happening in the spirit realm and how they track us. When one begins to read Spiritist literature, the parables that Jesus told us becomes clear. It's just so exciting. When he told us that the Father of all was notified of everything, that just wasn't a sentiment to make us think twice before we commit a wrong act, but a statement of fact. Only within the last 10 to 20 years could enough people visualize how this could occur. We are only, think of the Reverend G. Vale back in 1917. You can think, well, you got to write the information. It wouldn't even enter his mind that every bit of data was captured and is retrievable. This is why no literature presented to the human race should be regarded as the final absolute word of God, since at each major stage of understanding, we shall be given more information. Spiritism tells us that only the messages of love, fraternity, and charity are eternal, while all else is what was transmitted to people according to the level of sophistication at the time. Therefore, understand this well. There's no such thing as privacy. Nothing we do, say, or think is ever hidden or unexposed. We are all live in glass houses. On one hand, this is a frightening disclosure, but on the other hand, we all share the same circumstances. Spirits superior to us have journeyed through their time of undisciplined thoughts. They all understand what we are going through, and they're all sympathetic to our plight, just as we watch our young children make mistake after mistake, but ever loving them and spurring on their growth. The spirit realm benevolently looks down upon us. Now, let's take one more hypothesis. Take all that's been revealed by the Spirit Kathleen to the Reverend G. Vale Owen back in 1917, and think about what the New Testament said. Think about what Emmanuel told the Reverend Chico Xavier. We are all connected to the universal cloud. We all live in the spirit ocean. We all send messages that can travel throughout the universe. We can communicate between different states of existences. What does this imply? As a thought experiment, think of your definition of distance. For us on Earth, it is the space measured in miles or kilometers between 2 points. Now think of a video game or a movie where the characters travel throughout the universe they live in. There are distances in these man-made places. In the video game world, your avatar may travel from one land to another, a real distance to them as they cross rivers, mountains, and oceans. On the screen, the scenes unfold, but all our images are in fact driven by software programmed by a team of analysis coders and managers. An actor in the game may take a plane from one city to another, but in reality, all the confines within one studio. On screen, all appears immense, expansive landscapes unfold, all created by teams of people who are in close association with each other. Commands are spoken and heard, while on the screen it may appear that different actors are continents apart. In the software domain, all the landscape, characters, and dialogue are orchestrated by layers of system, all in constant communication, whereupon a change of state in one aspect is immediately transmitted to all other sub-applications that need to know. I'm sorry if I'm getting too technical here, but let me keep going, and then I apologize because this is so exciting. So in that video game, a central database, so all these things that look like worlds to you or planets, or you're attacking different things and different sizes of armies, a central database holds all static and dynamic data. Now, static data may be how a character looks, right? Or something like that. Dynamic is how much power a character has, or how big an army is, or how powerful, some sort of magic thing is. Everything runs according to certain rules, right? In games, for actors, there are limits to green screen interactions. Their voices and the ability of microphones to pick up sound is a constant. In the video world, the capability of the computer running the game, the screen resolutions, the memory size, all must be respected. This is true in the world we live in. Now, God is the creator, the director of our universe. He lays down the rules. Rules that try as we might to ignore are impossible to isolate ourselves for long. We are the actors in the constructed characters in the world, a world real to us, for we are within it, but constructed as the Spirit, Kathleen would say, a vehicle for us to learn what we have been assigned. In our life, we wander from one movie set or software operating system platform to another, each with its own specifications. Always, and this is important, taking with us our personality. This is the gift of God. We are like characters in a video game, but the difference is we are given free will. We are dynamic. We grow. We rise. We ascend. We are given free will to roam as far as our capabilities will take us into a land of many lands in a mansion with many rooms. So now let's change a bit. First, let me get some water, because that was a long process. Now, again, remember, this is what Spiritism tells us, and this is why the more you investigate Spiritism and start with the Spirits book, very vital. It's just amazing that what you'll learn, and you'll really understand your own life, right? So let's talk about another one. Let's talk about in the power of spirits is how is evil stopped, right? How does good spirits cure evil? So we're also told in the books by Reverend Vale Owen that good high spirits descend, and also by the books of Chico Xavier, great books by Andre Luis. Everyone should at least start with the Nosso Lar, N-O-S-S-O Lar, L-A-R. It's also a movie. You can rent it, I think, for $3.99. It's a great movie. So read the first one, then you want to read all the rest. So let's talk about good high spirits descend into the lower zone and below to help poor souls trapped in an atmosphere of ignorance and evil. Often they stand passive, awaiting a call for help or an opportunity to assist. But there are times when action is called for. Now, here's an example. In most of the spiritual literature I have read to date, from Allan Kardec to Leon Denis to Francisco C. Xavier, higher spirits stand ready to help those who have finally reached the point where they cry out to God seeking his love. And usually when an immature spirit is guided to seek a higher road, it is done through conversation, understanding, and doing favors for him or her until they realize for themselves the superiority of kindness and serving others. So one exception of the passive approach I found was in the book Memoirs of a Suicide by Yvonne Pereira. In the book, Camilo, the spirit author, tells us about the time he witnessed his spirit benefactors attempting to expose the past of a spirit so he would understand his own crimes and repent. The spirit's name was Agenor. He had been in seclusion, a type of prison, in a hospital center for suicides. He had been forcibly removed from the lower zone because he and his gang of spirits would prey on impressionable people. They would obsess them, cause them to commit suicide, and then use them when their spirits left their body. He had been in isolation for 38 years. Here's what the high spirit said to Agenor during one of his interrogations. This is what they told him. Our reasons for depriving you of your freedom are explained every day. You know you are guilty. You know that you have lured a dozen unwary individuals into committing suicide because they let themselves be deluded by the nefarious suggestions of your ploys as a cunning obsessor, either distracting them for the simple pleasure of doing evil or because you are jealous of them for some reason. Just as you used to do in the past when you disparaged poor maidens who were enamored with you and who carelessly trusted you, leading them to commit suicide after having been bitterly betrayed by you, an omen of your future as an obsessor. But your pride stifles the logical connection and conclusion of reason, and you prefer rebelliousness and sophism because they are more comfortable. So this is very interesting because when you read the books by Andre Luis, it's like hardly anything's ever done like to actually put someone in like a type of a prison. But this person they actually put on in Yvonne Pereira, actually they put in a prison. So the high spirits went over Agenor's life for his thoughts and the thoughts of those around him, of course, or retrieval, as I said, by the universal cloud, and exposed all of the wrongs he had committed, from the complete neglect of of his parents, leaving his mother destitute and forgotten, to his lies, to the woman he took advantage of during his time on earth. The high spirits knew that if he reincarnated with his present state of mind, his life would be no different from the previous time, that more people would be hurt and destroyed in the wake of his utter selfishness. Now, that was Beyond Pierre. In the book Beyond the Veil, the Spirit Kathleen, speaking directly to Reverend Vale Owen, spoke of a time when the spirit leader of a group of spirits communicating to him went deep into the lower zones. This is what she said. From that colony, we went further into the regions of gloom. We had done what we were able, going from group to group, where houses clustered or where fires burned, and ministered comfort or advice to those who would receive us. But they were not much readiness for the most part. Some few would be able to retrace their steps upward from that place, but the many would have to descend lower in the misery of the further regions before their hardness should give place to despair, and despair should return into longing, and a glimmer of light should glow in those poor lost souls. Then would come repentance and amendment and their toilsome journey towards the valley of the bridge. But that time was not yet at hand, so we left them, for we had our orders. In our minds, the map of the country by which to find our way to those places where special work awaited us. For we did not go at random into those dark places, but a purpose sent for us by those who sent us thither. So, the lower zone, which we live in the lower zone, as Chico Xavier said, lower zone starts at the crust of the earth. Or actually, Chico Xavier said, the lower zone starts at your tip of your nose. So it isn't the land of lifeless zombies, the undead. It instead is where souls who have left their bodies to go into the spirit realm find themselves when they're tied to the earth, either through excessive materialism or by dominance of lesser emotions such as hate, envy, jealousy. They reside here until they realize the futility of living in the land composed of anger and criminality. God affords those souls the free will to make wrong choices and to live with that until they find a new path. High spirits are there constantly watching to help those who determine they no longer wish a life of suffering. So this group, they went into a walled city in the lower zone. And they came to this large city, and they saw a massive gateway where guards marched to and fro. So this is the other fascinating thing about the lower zone. There are cities, and of course they're chaotic. They're more like controlled by mafia types. And it was like they had great houses, heavy built houses. They built like prison fortresses, right? And they came to this large square, and there was a statue on a high pedestal in the middle, and toward one side, and there's a big building there. And the statue appeared to be a man dressed in a Roman toga. In his left hand, he had a mirror. In his right hand, he had he poured red wine into a basin. And there's other images in this lower zone city. Most are satirizing the virtues of childhood, maternity, and love. So this group of spirits, they entered the building behind the statue and walked up the large staircase. They entered this big hall, and in this hall, there were many people listening, and there were all these, they thought they were in their finest clothes, of course, but to the high spirits, they looked like, they were in rags. And they heard the governor of the city give a speech. And the good spirits, they said, they were very disheartened with this. So they said that, they would have turned away, but they had a task to do, right? And they have to help show evil, it's the way to the purity. And so, of course, on earth, we all live together, right? The good, the bad, and the indifferent. Human nature causes us to conform to the norm. In the polite society, even a wicked person may put on an appearance of civility to be able to blend in and survive. Whereas in the lower zones, after the divine law of affinity has filtered the bad to where they belong and the good into the spheres of light and love, all that is left are those who are of ill intent. There is an absence of any pull to perform good or decent acts. There is only what life is like in prison, where the inmates run the compound. Force is king and nothing is respected. But the spirit world, God uses evil to fight evil, so that any soul who embraces the darkness would sooner or later discover the pitfalls of living amongst people like themselves. There are no idealists, no willing and loyal subordinates, only menacing men and women biding their time, looking for any weakness to be exploited. And the dark governor was talking, and he kind of created a mirror image of the gospel. He said that, he taught them that he was like the beast that slaughtered the lamb. The lamb was weak, but its blood useful in feeding the beast. He went on and on. It was very disheartening, as I said before. So as the governor was talking about that, one of the members, think about this big auditorium with the governor on the stage and everyone, all the audience out there. All the spirits were behind the governor. They were not visible yet. And then one of the high spirits made herself visible. So as a woman, she dressed herself all in white and she was radiating light. And then all of a sudden, she started appearing. And everyone started looking at her. And then and she didn't say anything. She just stood there. And she held like white lilies. And the audience just looked at her. And then they started crying. And, then more women started crying and men started also yelling. And it was just, what they did is they understood how bad they'd been. And the governor, he looked back behind him and he started striding to that woman in the audience who started crying because he didn't want everybody to cry because the governor knew that he could not do anything against the high spirits. And then the leader of the spirits came to the governor and said, okay, stop what you're doing. Come to me. And at this, he said, but you, my lord, are welcome. So you come in peace among us. Yet these poor cravens too much be dazzled with the light of that fair lady behind you. But I do but seek to bring them to their reason, for they give you your proper welcome. So the evil governor, knew that he and his men were no match for the power of high spirits. I mean, this is like an adult against a kindergartner, right? He tried to reason out of the situation as little as possible. He attempted to hide his anger as having to quickly obey another's command. But the group of high spirits weren't just sent to interrupt the speech. They were sent on a mission, and now the mission was to be revealed. And this is what the leader of the high spirit said. He goes, come here. He says, you have taken upon you to blaspheme, both in speech and also by your trappings. Take off that crown of blasphemy and lay down the scepter's crook. You dare to mock at one who claims these, his children, whom you hold in your bond of fear. These things he did. And then I spoke to some of the men standing near, and I said to them gently, you have been cowards too long, and this man has enslaved you body and soul. He shall be taken to a city where one stronger in evil might than he rules. Do you who have served him hitherto do now my bidding. Disrobe him of that mantle and that girdle which he has donned in mockery of him, who even he shall own and someday be sovereign prince and lord. And then I waited, and there came four of them and began to unbuckle his belt. And he turned in fierce rage upon them, but I had taken the staff from him, and on this I laid upon his shoulder. And at the touch he sensed the power within me and strove no more. So my will with him was done, and I bade him to go forth of the hall into darkness without, where guards awaited him to take him to that far region where he had done to others as it should be done to him. So there are two vital points to what occurred. First, the power of a high spirit over a low spirit is absolute. As I said before, is as if an adult confronted a 4 or 5-year-old. There's no contest in will or strength. Superheroes are real, and they are high spirits. They are so powerful and use their overwhelming force for good and only good. This is why we are being trained. One day we shall too have supremacy over countless lower spirits, but we must be prepared to use our strength wisely and fairly at all times. Secondly, the governor is being sent to a place where he shall be under the command of a soul more evil and more powerful than he. He shall be given the privilege of learning what it was like to be under his direction. This is not a punishment for a bad man. It is an extreme learning exercise for one who refused to comprehend a previous lesson delivered in a gentler manner. One day, even the governor shall rise. One day his suffering will be too much to bear. One day he will wake and decide to change. And on that day, he will lift his head up and gaze in the direction where the high spirits came from and ask for help, and it will be given. So after the governor left, another one of the high spirits on that stage started to sing. He didn't sing a hymn, but a happy and rousing song to lift their spirits. The poor souls in the audience required a change of mood, right from fear and despair to hope and happiness. The light in the great hall changed from dark and gloomy to bright and merry. The high spirits didn't leave the city after they finished with the governor. They waited for another team to come so the people of the city could be led to a higher plane toward the light. And the Reverend Vale Owen, upon hearing the story, asked, how did the guards know to come from the lower city? What he was told demonstrates the omnipotence of the spirit realm. This was answered. There you touch upon one of the difficult matters to understand until you learn more of the ways of God, his wisdom, and his sovereignty. In brief, know you, friend, that God is sovereign, not in heaven alone, but in hell also. And in all the hells he rules, and he alone. The others dominate locally, but he rules over them. The guards I spoke of were men of that same city to which we sent the man. Evil men they were, and did not own allegiance to the creator of them all, but knowing not whose judgment delivered this one more victim into their hands, nor knowing it was for his ultimate salvation, they did our will without ado. You may find the key here, if you go beneath and deep enough, to much of what happens on your earth. Evil, by many, are thought to be outside the pale of his kingdom, and evils and disasters to be fully manifestations of his dynamic energizing. But both are in hands to use, and even evil men, and wittingly, are made to work out his plans and purpose in the ultimate. So, no one, not one person, does not partake in the aims of God. Even the most horrific tyrants of our time, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, in some mysterious manner contribute to the earth's plan. What this trio of personified evil did was wicked indeed, but it must have had an ultimate purpose, if only to ward off future generations to the great disaster that fascism and communism carry with them. We, living on the earth in our short lives, are unable to discern the great arc of history, the spirals of progress, and the destruction ever upward, but hard to discern to our eyes. All have a purpose and a goal. What are the multitude of the intervening starting lines for individuals, nations, and cultures is beyond me, but I do know the ultimate goal for Earth to become a planet of regeneration. Earth will eventually be free of copious selfishness, hate, envy, and the wars that we as a human race must suffer through. And as we become aware and as we develop into souls on this planet from primitive to mature and educated spirits, when a majority of us incarnate on Earth as peace-loving, rational, and kind souls, the Earth will begin to move to a better place, a world which will be a paradise compared to the one we inhabit presently. The engine to drive us onward is the untiring actions of high spirits, elevated souls who toil for the incarnate and discarnates on and around the earth. So someday we may take our rightful place alongside them. And this shows you the power of spirits. They are almost omnipotent gods in themselves compared to us on earth and to lower spirits on earth. And they use evil to fight evil. They use different methods for communications. All of this information is given to us in the book by Vale Owen. And then I categorize each one of these things in Spirit Universe, Book 2 of Spiritism, all about the power of spirits. I suggest everyone read Vale Owen or read my books, read the Spirits book. They're all very interesting. Oh, and Leda from Brazil. We've had people from all over. From Rosalind from Los Angeles, from Guatemala, from Brazil. It's so exciting here with spreading Spiritism. And also, let me ask you, coming to the end, if anyone's missed any of these, tell people that we have a YouTube channel, NW Spiritism on YouTube, or go to my blog, nwspiritism.com. You can click, and there's a link on the right side. You can get to the YouTube channel. You can read my articles on the blog. Also on this streaming, please share it with other Facebook sites, with your friends, or go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, share it to your friends, or there's lots of different people talking on the Kardec Radio Facebook page. Tell them about other people that you may like. There might be that special person that gives, great talks. Tell them about them. Tell them about Kardec Radio to put on your Android or iOS Apple device. So I want to thank everyone for being here this Sunday, late afternoon or night or whatever time frame you are in. It's very exciting. And God bless all of you. I'll do our end credits now.
I would like to thank everyone for listening to our program on Kardec Radio and to point you in the direction to find more information about the spirit world around us. You can visit my blog at www.nwspiritism.com. Again, that is www.nw as in Northwest Spiritism.com. And if you are ever in the Northwest, I certainly would welcome to have you come to our meeting on Bainbridge Island near Seattle in the state of Washington. Many blessings to all of you, and please continue to explore Spiritism and the spirit world around us.